Everything looks great. I love the bow tie. Thanks a lot for coming. I was just telling the audience how much really your article taught me. And it's not very often I feel I read something that totally changes my view of Bitcoin after 3.5 years.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate that. Was a genesis of the call. And then you weren't here, but you're being joined by one of my colleagues at Quantum Economics, Jason Dean, and he spends the significant majority of his time studying and talking about Bitcoin. Nice. So he brings he's going to bring a lot to the discussion.
Great.
And so we're going to start, with presentations from, do you have a presentation? Or are you just going to talk?
Well, I'm happy to just talk about my article if you'd like to.
Yeah, I mean, whatever you want to do, you have to present if you've got something to present. But I guess both of our speakers are just going to talk for about 10 to 12 minutes. During that time, I'll probably have some questions for them as they speak. And then when they're done, we will open it up to questions from the audience. And so with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and turn it over to Jeffrey to talk about his article. Jeffrey Tucker.
Yeah, very good. So the article, maybe you could tell it had quite a lot of sort of white hot passion about it. And the reason for that is that I'm best when writing and researching and writing when I'm discovering something I don't know. So and that article was sort of the genesis of 5 years of thinking, which
what originally attracted you to Bitcoin?
Well, I had been following from 2001 all the way to 2009, the attempts to come up with a medium of exchange that was digital, like uniquely designed for the internet. And in those days, everything was changing about the world. It was like from 1995, you could see the unfolding of a new universe. It's a sort of great migration of the physical world into this new realm of digital everything, or at least digital lots of things, right? So you could see there was like a new industrial revolution. But and every great economic revolution begins in a kind of maybe you would call it like a barter stage, and then moves into a more sophisticated stage involving a medium of exchange that's more suitable to the prevailing technology. And we really hadn't had that yet. And throughout the early 2000s, for like 10 years, there were all these attempts to come up with something like a digital currency that was designed especially for the internet, for internet exchange. The problem was that quite often these new technologies just borrowed from prevailing technologies, which is to say that they were proprietary, and there were a lot of companies that were struggling and really trying to make a new currency for the internet, and they all failed. So I had become incredulous about the possibility, because money is distinct from many other goods, especially from all other digital goods, which are infinitely reproducible. Like, by which I mean, this conversation we're having can be filmed. It's not a real conversation. We're not having it in person, but it is a digital conversation. It can be replicated, potentially billions and trillions of times, and distributed out on the internet. The ideas that are being spoken here can be learned and discovered by anybody else. Anybody can repeat my words, and the repetition of what I'm saying right now will not take that away from me. It just makes a new copy of it. I mean, that's what the internet specializes in. It became the world's greatest copy machine, the greatest mimeograph in human history. I mean, that's the essence of what the internet is, essentially. It's just wonderful. The discovery of that, by the way, for me was the moment in which I realized the potential. I remember sitting in my office, and let's say this was 1996 or 1997. And
where was your office at the time?
At the time, I was in Alabama and at Auburn University, at the Mises Institute, and I had a book.
You were teaching. What were you teaching?
I was working as a digital development director and editorial director at the Ludwig von Mises Institute, and
okay, wow,
yeah.
That's very cool. Just for those who don't know, can you tell the audience who he is?
Well, he was this great, economist of the 20th century, and his book, 1912, Book Theory of Money and Credit, really sort of established the 20th century's understanding of what money is, and it's always been kind of my Bible of money, and that's what my article was essentially about. But I remember I started putting texts online the same time all the other geeks were doing it, but I didn't really understand why I was doing it, other than the fact that I could look at it, and I put up a number of articles online, and I realized one day I was sitting in my chair because I'm a little bit stupid, and I thought,
And what year are we now?
we're talking about like something like 96, 97,
Okay.
and sitting in my chair and realizing I had a copy of the article across the room. It was over there, and yet I had a copy also I had previously uploaded on the internet on our new website, which went up in 1995, and I decided not to get out of my chair. I decided to click on this new thing called a web browser. And I thought, now that's interesting. And it's not just interesting for me, because I'm too lazy to get across the room and walk 5 feet away and get a physical copy of this. It's not just I who can do this, but billions and billions of other people potentially can also do this, thanks to this one little capacity to type and click on things. And that was a revelation for me, because so realizing that, I dedicated the next essentially 15 years of my life to putting books online and that sort of thing. Being a major participant in the great migration, out of the bound world of physicality into the infinite world of digital everything and infinite copying. But the problem of money is a peculiar one, because you can't have infinitely reproducible money. That's just not going to work. Right? It's like money, because of its peculiar characteristics, unlike, say, carrots or bananas or steaks, where you kind of want them to be infinitely reproducible, even if they're not. You really don't want money to be in that situation. You want it to be scarce, in the sense that, like a known quantity that you can't infinitely reproduce. I mean, there's been countless monies through history that have been destroyed through infinite reproduction. I mean, this is what happened when the first American colonists came to the U.S. and the Native Americans used their own money called wampum, which was like shells, and the English were smart enough to breed this stuff. They cultivated it, on their own shores, and brought it over and said, "Oh, here's our money." Well, next thing you know, there's a hyperinflation. It's dead, right? So this has gone on again and again throughout all human history. So digital money needed some way to not be reproducible. And in those days, there were all these experiments out there, and by the way, they attracted not always the most savory of characters. They would come up with a new money, whatever. And I don't mean to implicate anybody in particular, but there were e-money and e-gold and e-cash and all these things that were coming out. It's like, give us your money, then we'll give you our money, and and then everything would be wonderful. But of course, the websites were hacked. The email lists were stolen. Then they would send out. There was just scam after scam after scam, and so by 2009, I thought, this can never work. It can never work. It just, something's wrong. Now, it was a mistake on my part, because I in retrospect, I realized that I ruled out the possibility of a distinct money for the internet. Now, a payment system, sure, PayPal, right? Anybody can type in a credit card into a box, and that sort of thing, and there's security issues there. But a money that obtains its value solely because of the market, independent of any existing money, struck me as, well, it's not going to work. I just really thought this. So at the time, I was getting emails from various graduate students at MIT and other people saying, listen, Bitcoin's a thing. Bitcoin's a thing. You really need to look at this thing. This would have been, 2000, 2009. Now, keep in mind, and people don't remember this, but the Genesis block was in
right when it happened.
Yeah, the Genesis block came out in January. I mean, the white paper was issued in October, something like that. Genesis block in 2009, but even for 10 months in 2009, there was no sense that this new thing had any value. right? I mean, just people didn't know that it could possibly be valuable. So there had to be this kind of period in which it was, a small group of geeks were hammering on it. And I estimate there was like about 100 transactions a day, I think, in those 10 minutes. It wasn't that much, but they worked. That was the important thing. So people were successfully
transacting. Yeah.
Well, what you're doing is successfully transferring ownership rights and a ledger from one person to another person on a geographically non-contiguous basis, at almost instantly at no cost, right? And so that seems not that relevant, maybe. This is your slice of ownership of a ledger. This is your slice of ownership of ledger. Wait, I'd like to give you half of my slice of ownership. Oh, thank you very much. I'll give you a quarter back, and so on and so on. But realizing how resilient the network was, and how there was because it wasn't a proprietary ownership, there was no that everybody could share in the knowledge of what was happening on this ledger. Then there developed an element of trust to it. And as far as I can tell, by October 6th of that year, I think that was the first posted price of Bitcoin, which was something like a 16th of a penny. Now, I unfortunately have a complete email records of those days, and seeing all the people who wrote me saying, you should care about this. I think this has solved all the problems that you had previously highlighted from digital money. I think that we have learned how to have
you remember the first person who told you that? Or, I mean, it's incredible, to be hearing about somebody who was deeply involved, at that early point of time.
Yeah, I've written several of them since, and we've had correspondences, and they're all kind of high flyers now, but of course we've never heard of them. But yeah, they were graduate students and geeks and that sort of thing. And they were begging me to pay attention to it. And I kept asking them to explain this to me. I can't understand. What is this thing? I can't understand. Like, I'm a little bit stupid. So, and they tried to explain it to me. And it was interesting because...
and I'm sorry, but just, so they're reaching out to you because you have this position at this institute and you're
right. I have this platform. Right.
Thought leader on Austrian economics. Is that...
That's right. That's right. And so I was in a position to kind of... broadcast this information out to the public, which automatically made me suspicious, right? Like,
Jason, by the way, I'm sure you're as fascinated as I am by this, and so feel free to chime in too if you have questions. I mean, I think we're just going to basically have a dialogue here about what Youre is talking about, because this is great stuff.
The real problem was the monetary orthodoxy at the time was this can't happen, right? So, and it was funny because I really then, and I hope I'm not giving away too much information, because I really appreciate, my job that I had at that time. But by the time I became convinced that this needed to be discussed, also, by the way, the language surrounding Bitcoin at the time was really different from the language of monetary economics. So the two communities basically couldn't talk to each other, right?
What time was it when you thought
this is 2010, 2009, 2010.
Okay, so at that time for me, and I'm certainly don't have anywhere near the depths of you, but like I literally had a moment in time where I didn't understand, and then boom, and there's a word for it called the Gestalt shift, where one moment you think the world is one thing, and the next moment it's something completely different. And so that's what happened to me. Did you have that kind of experience?
But it took 2 years after that. But
this need to be discussed. I don't really believe it, but
yeah. So I wanted to at least let our readers know, that this is a serious contender for a possibility of, the transfer of value on a geographically non-contiguous basis that is not inviolable, and that actually...
Had you ever said, here's a serious contender to do that?
Okay, so here's what happened to me, and you will not be surprised about this, or you'll understand what I mean. But it turned out that this was a little bit too far for the institution I was working for which I was working at the time, and a little bit little bit out there, and they were concerned that if that my editorializing on this, or even drawing people's attention to it, I might be participating in a Ponzi scheme, that I was going out on a ledge,
Really?
you know, that would be permanently discrediting the
They just
institution.
couldn't imagine that this was a thing.
Yeah, that's right. And so I got my wings clipped for the
Wow.
first time, and since I'd been working there, and I was banned from writing on the topic. Well, let's just say a year later I was gone, because and one of the reasons I left was that I thought, well, I need to have the freedom to write about these things and think about these things. So at my new position, then I actually began to write about it. But first I had to understand, right? Like, I don't like to write about things I don't understand, but there wasn't a lot of coherent information out there. Like, everything that was written about Bitcoin between 2009 and 2000, let's just say 12, the fall of 2012, was highly technical, using language that economists do not understand, about distributed ledgers and these sorts of things. It's like we weren't trained to understand it, much less double key cryptography and all that. So what I had to do was actually study all these things. So I took off a few weeks and actually read books on cryptography, on ledger technology.
Would say anybody in particular you remember being more helpful than others in terms of stuff that you read at that time?
It wasn't about Bitcoin in particular. I just read about cryptography, right?
Yes.
In general, about the subject, because I felt like I needed.
But just like he's the person that's most often. Oh yeah, the first time was reading David Shaw.
Yeah, and embedding myself in this world of cyberpunkism, punkism, I guess you would say, and then adding new bits of knowledge, which I think is something actually we should all be doing all the time, in whatever we do. Like, you need to take your existing knowledge base and like attach this and attach this and attach this, because it's like very difficult to understand a world without a comprehensive understanding of the hot issues of the time. And that sometimes it requires you take time off posting on Twitter and actually like read a book. And like earlier this year, I read Cell Biology for Dummies, because I needed to understand the virus, right? So you should do this.
I describe what I do primarily as I learn.
That's right. So in those days, I was learning about all these things I didn't really understand about distributed ledgers and in particular about cryptography. And so I would say by March or April of 2013, I was ready to go. And I wrote my first article on the topic. And I basically said, this is a real deal. And I said it to a very big audience. And I was very excited about it, because in the meantime, I had sold.
Oh, you said it to your audience who's been reading your stuff.
It was to Agora financial audience. It was a very large audience. It was like 300,000 subscribers to our daily email. And
300,000 movers and shakers of the, right.
It was a big deal. And I did not expect that after I did that the ceiling would fall in on me, and that I would be accused all over the world as a promoter of a Ponzi scheme and a scam artist and a racketeer, and that I was misleading people, and that I was discrediting myself forever. And I tell you, those were sweaty days. I thought, well, maybe it's true, because you couldn't know for sure. I mean, I was pretty sure.
Yeah. Yes, of course, nobody knows, right? I mean, it could still fall down, right? I mean,
that's right. That's right.
100x more likely back then than today, and 100 times more likely, a couple years before that.
That's right. And not to mention the fact that in saying that I believe this stuff works, I was not able to understand entirely what the difference between this digital money and conventional money really was. Like, I didn't really fully understand what blockchain technology meant in a larger context. There's a lot of things I didn't know, but I went forward with my intuitions at the time, and I fell under attack, and Bitcoin at that point was, I think, $14.
Was there anybody else that you were talking to at the time and learning from or sharing this with?
Yeah, there was a few friends. Well, people got in contact with me. That's how the world works. Right? You write about a particular topic, and suddenly, you get these enthusiasts writing me. And so I had, and in the midst of this, and this is what's weird about it, because I was always writing about it. Basically, my interest in Bitcoin is that it's a monetary technology. right? And I still think there's a lot of things that are unsettled about what that really means. But I was not saying, oh, it's going to go to the moon. I was not one of those go to the moon kind of people. Buy now. That's not what I was doing.
We're
But
putting little rockets in your newsletters.
yeah, right. I would never told anybody to do this. I would never even recommend my mother do it because, God knows. I mean, at some point in the middle of this, I had a wallet. At some point in the middle of this, I had a wallet that actually, from which 10 Bitcoin actually disappeared. Actually, and I still to this day kind of understand what happened. It was I don't want to tell you the name of the wallet, but so it was a messy time, right? But I was not saying the price will go up. I was not saying that, but nonetheless, in this environment of hysterical, where the price really does determine the public interest, for Bitcoin to go from $14, and there's a whole prehistory here, where it went from 16th of a penny to $1 to, and so on. But for it to go from $14, which is high, and then obtain $30, and then people were like, okay, this is insane. And I thought at the time, people still don't believe. They don't believe it. If we could just get to $100, all the skeptics will go away. How could a digital money be 100 times more valuable than the most valuable currency in the world, the US dollar? Then all the skeptics will go away. Of course, it didn't happen. It had to get to $1,000 and fall to $300.
It's funny. I've never really thought of it like that. I mean, I wonder, there must have been a lot of excitement. I'd never thought of this when it actually passed $1.
There were a lot. You can look at the history of, I forget now, but because blockchain.info has a lot of historical charts. You can see the day which it bumped. It was at $1. There millions and millions of Bitcoins were sold at that time.
Wow. Because that's it. I'm going to write it to $1.
I mean, and it makes sense, right?
What year was it before it was $1? Like 10, 11?
Well, this would have been, no, I think this would have been 11. Yeah. And so a lot of Bitcoin was sold at $1, which I understand. I mean, why not? Why would you believe that this magic internet money could be, permanently plateaued at equal to the world's most powerful currency? So,
really, yeah, it boggles the mind.
Yeah, that's right. So
watch it from a 16th of a cent.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
That, a 16th of a cent, right? My favorite all-time tweet. I can't believe I sold all my Bitcoin. I forget exactly what it was at 80 cents. It's $7 now.
Yeah, that's right. And this has been going on for 10 years.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. One of the reasons I wrote that article, by the way, was because, let's just say I was consulting with an institution that recently obtained a great deal of Bitcoin. And I was talking to, some important players within that institution that were of some age and experience, let's just say. And everybody was desperate to sell because they had some sense that, well, a lot of stupid young people who all love, Zoom calls have made this phony baloney mythical thing called Bitcoin valuable temporarily, but damn it, we better bail out on this thing so long as the illusion lasts, And so, right? So, and these are all 70 plusers and 80 plusers, and
it's hard to see. Actually, one of the, I wrote an article called, the 10 biggest reasons why people can't see the crypto light. And I actually think that there's a correlation to some degree in terms of how wealthy you are and your ability to see it, right? If you're really wealthy, you've been wealthy by just looking like, straight ahead at, or if you're wealthy and super, super curious, then you have, that's when you start looking around and really opening up the mind to the possibilities you need to really understand Bitcoin.
Well, there's another condition too. If you have too many credentials and you're too educated, you almost can't understand something new. I mean, that's what I noticed. So this is why the economics
Yes,
community.
exactly. Because you're just doing this. You think, okay, now I've got it, right? And you don't.
Yeah, I have a PhD. I mean, what the hell? I know everything. You can't tell me new things. Also, who is this Satoshi guy? I mean, what is he on is he at an Ivy League university? Does he have credentials? And why should I believe him? Does he have any journal articles? You know, what's his publication record? You know, so this is this is the problem. This is why Bitcoin really upended not just digital economics, but also academic sociology and, you know, our understanding of the culture of entrepreneurship and that sort of thing. It really did inaugurate or codify, you know, the fact that we live in a bottom-up revolutionary world. And so it represents more than just what it is.
Sure, that's, you know, and that's exciting, you know, when people appreciate that. But it's hard for people, you know, I mean, that's, I mean, for me, you know, in all sincerity, I really do believe that it is, I mean, it's the next thing. The internet, you know, was the last thing. This is the next thing.
Right.
And every new thing is the biggest thing ever. So this is going to be way bigger. The impacts are going to be way bigger than the internet. And it's so shocking that, you know, some tiny percentage of the world is even, you know, aware that it's a thing. How's it changed now? Where do you see it in terms of like the colleagues, these people you're talking about? Where are they now in terms of appreciating that this is a thing or not?
I've not, to my knowledge, received a single apology in 10 years. So for 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 the things they said about me. So I don't know. I think most of them just went quiet. There was one very interesting monetary economist who called me like a serious person and a major big shot, like to deign to call me. And those days it was on Skype, I guess. Was to him, he was trying to save my soul from corruption, you know, right? So he called me up April 2013 and he said, Jeffrey, what you are doing is terrible. You're discrediting yourself, and all your work over 20 years has now been shredded by rallying behind this Ponzi scheme. And I said, well, what in your view is wrong with Bitcoin? He said, well, it's not real. And I said, this conversation we're having, do you consider it real? And he said, yeah, it's real. I said, but you do know that this is just digits. You're looking at a digital image of me, not actually me. And the voice you're hearing is a digital rendering of my voice, not my actual voice. You know that this conversation by that standard is not a real conversation. And is a blank look on his face. He just had no answer for me.
Well, did he understand? Was he able to? But, you know, one of the weird things that I've found personally is that it can't be taught. It has to be learned. People have to be curious. Everybody sees it in a different way, given their, you know, the prism of how they look at the world through.
A lot of it comes down to ownership. This is why I think it's really important for people not to talk about Bitcoin with all about, at least, I'm not sure about now, but back in the day in 2013, 14, 15, and 16, the best way I could persuade anybody was just to help them experience it. So I'd say, download this wallet. I'm going to send you something. Send, boom. Wait, where did that come from? I mean, the same thing happened to the Federal Reserve, right? I mean, a team of Bitcoiners went to the Fed board governors meeting to demonstrate how Bitcoin works. And Janet Yellen, I guess she was the head of the Fed at the time. And these Bitcoiners, you know, pulled up a, I think it was Wikipedia, and they had a QR code or something like that for Bitcoin donation. And they pulled it up on a screen and shot the code and sent it, and boom, boom, they saw it arrive in the blockchain. And Janet Yellen saw all this stuff happening. And her jaw just dropped, right? She just fell open. And she said, well, who processed that transaction? Well, nobody processed that transaction. You know, that was the blockchain at work. Is everything okay with the recording? I see some green sign just came up. Yes, it's
no, everything's going great. I got to tell you, this is awesome. So thank you so much.
Yeah, and
And
she,
by the way, the
yeah,
audience is loving it as well. So thank you so much.
but she couldn't believe it. She said, "Who processed transaction? Nobody processed. It's just a blockchain. What is a blockchain? It's a ledger. Well, who owns the ledger? Nobody. Everybody. It's an open source protocol, and this is the money, the means of exchange is the Bitcoin. Where does the Bitcoin get of its value? Is somebody backing this? It obtained its value honestly, went from zero to what it is today, because the market values it, and that's it. And she couldn't believe it. She couldn't believe that there was a currency that didn't need an intermediary, and that was really the second level of my understanding. And that's what my article about, where does Bitcoin obtain its value? It's like the reason it has value. And
just, I'm sorry, just to back up for a minute.
yeah,
But again, I mean, one of the things, obviously, the way that you described Bitcoin and nothing backing it, blah, 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 right? You know, and when people say that, I say, well, right, exactly like the US dollar.
right. Well, it's hard to, like, there is a mystery why the dollar is valuable, right? And I think the answer to that has to do with its history. It was previously backed by gold in the 19th century, and then ultimately, 2 centuries earlier, by silver. And so you can't understand monetary value without understanding its history. This is why I think Bitcoin history is so important, why I talk about it so much. It hasn't always been valuable, right? When it was first released, it had a value of zero, at least as far as the market was concerned. It was just a plaything. It earned its value honestly, from October 6th all the way to the present day, by being an awesome protocol. Yeah. Right? And the reason I think, and that's why I emphasize so strongly in the article that Bitcoin is a unique money. Like, usually when we think about money, we think about a payment system, a geographically non-contiguous payment system. Like, if I have $1 and you're standing next to me, I can give it to you. That's fine. But if you're on the other side of town and I want to send it to you, I'm going to have to deploy a third-party processing company. It's usually a proprietary company, Visa, MasterCard, Venmo, whatever it's going to be. And so what Bitcoin did was it wove together those two features of modern monetary experience. The existence of the means of exchange with a payment network all embedded together. So I made the argument, it's a little bit preposterous way to put it, but if there was such a thing as a Bitcoin without a blockchain, the Bitcoin would just be a Bitcoin. It would never obtain any value at all, right? It was sort of like, what are you going to do with a Bitcoin? You'd eat it, So it's only the capacity to transmit it in a way that overcomes the Byzantine generals problem, that causes the value to obtain, the market to value Bitcoin, because it's portable and movable and fungible and so on. And it's hard for people to think about this. We still think about payment systems and monetary and money as separate. And this is a huge thing for people to overcome.
We still think of it, money as what?
Money and payment systems as separate things. So, like, I work for the American Institute for Economic Research, and when our CFO of finance got a sizable Bitcoin donation, she treated it like, well, this donor decided to give us money not through transfers of stock or Visa using a credit card or by a bank transfer, but rather using the payment system called Bitcoin. And I think that's a reasonable way to think. The problem is that on another level, what's actually happened is that we've been given physical property or an in-kind gift. Same as if somebody had driven a truck up to our house and delivered us an original Rembrandt painting, right? So there's another way in which Bitcoin is actually just, it's the equivalent of an old master painting. It's like a unique thing that you cannot copy, that you now own. And explaining that to her, she's like, well, this is just, I thought it was just a way to send cash, and it is, but that cash is a different thing. It's not dollars. It's something completely different. So intellectually, that's a very, very difficult thing to process. And that, for me, once I understood that, was a revelation. And I don't think I really came to that conclusion until like 2015.
So, I mean, to me, at kind of a very macro level, right? What Bitcoin is it's this thing with a unique set of properties, right? Nothing has ever existed with these properties.
That's right.
The question is, and I think we're just scratching, what can something with these properties be?
Yeah, that's right. And this is a third level, and we can talk about that if you want to. But what's interesting about Bitcoin is it's always been the same thing from the Genesis block until now, right? It's only our understanding of it that seems to be growing. The protocol just sits there,
Yes, so funny. It really is hilarious. It really has. It's just a set of properties, and our view of what those properties can do, I think, still is we haven't begun to scratch the surface, I think, of what those.
It's evolving. It's evolving. And my third level of understanding was to realize that the ledger technology of the blockchain really is just the next level understanding of the next level technology for doing what we've always wanted to do, which is to thoroughly document ownership rights. I mean, since the ancient world, we've been trying to do this. It's not just enough to own something. You also need to demonstrate your ownership also. Because otherwise you can't really advance. If you own some goats and somebody comes along and said, no, you don't own those goats, I think you stole those goats. Well, unless you have the means to demonstrate that those are your goats, then you've got insecurity in your property. So that's why we come up with we invented not only property rights to help us allocate scarce resources, but then we also humanity in the course of anthropological evolution came to realize we needed a technology for documenting things. And so there was, in the early days, stone tablets and clay tablets and those sort of things where various primitive ledger technologies say, this is yours, this is yours, this is yours. And then we came up with the papyrus that was a little, that was kind of lame because you leave it out in the sun too long and it fades but then we got better with vellum, and with vellum, which is an awesome documentation technology, we developed double entry bookkeeping, and then the advent of banking and loans and payments and really.
When was vellum?
That vellum would have been 15th century, 14th, 15th century.
And who was vellum? What country?
No. Vellum is animal skins that are shaved, dried and shaved really carefully, and then with ink. It's extremely durable, unlike papyrus. So that was an improvement. And then of course we came up with paper, which was the 19th century thing, and then the creation and distribution of paper is glorious. And the next great revolution in documentation technology was, of course, the 1970s with the invention of databases, because then you could reflow data and that sort of thing. You didn't have to write a whole new document. You could just add a new entry and reflow it and recalculate it. And that was, and a lot of the economic growth from the 1970s, the 80s and 90s was due to that. But in the late 90s, we started experimenting with distributed technologies, mostly through file sharing and that sort of thing, which is awesome. But then the union of database technology plus file sharing created this what we call a distributed ledger that allows everybody to look at it and know who owns what with absolute certainty in a way that's never changeable throughout all history. So we created this implacable record, this invaluable record of ownership rights through distributed ledgers, and that was glorious. So the next step was monetizing those ownership rights, which is essentially what Bitcoin represents, and then creating a numeraire to represent some slice of those ownership rights. And so in a sense, we think of maybe Bitcoin as being like something for 21st century people, but it's not really true. I mean, if the ancient world had a blockchain technology, they certainly would have used it,
What percentage of your time do you spend on Bitcoin?
Well, it ebbs and flows. And I tell you, it does ebb and flow based on, market conditions. So when it was going up and up, and it was like 90% of my time, and I was speaking all over the world and that sort of thing. But, I have other interests I've been doing over the last 3 years. And when Bitcoin got stuck at 10K, up, down, for 3 years. We all knew there was the next stage because it's always 3 steps forward, 2 steps back. It was, or some combination of that. But nobody knows the exact timing. So I knew that, the day was coming, but I didn't think it was coming yet because that rally of, I have to think, was it
2008, January 2018 was
the
peak of the bubble.
Okay, so yeah, it was the rally, the crazy rally at the end of the previous year to 2017, where everybody just said, "Oh my God, Bitcoin's the greatest thing that ever happened." And I remember the lines at the ATMs in Atlanta, Georgia, were around the block giving me my Bitcoin. I thought, all right, there's going to be a lot of disappointed people here pretty soon, because just you're in the sector long enough, you know how this works, and I don't think it's a problem.
I have a word that I use to describe the tendency of markets to become bubbles and crash and become bubbles again. And the word that I use that I think perfectly describes that is capitalism.
Probably that's true. I mean, it's also maybe human nature. I mean, it's just,
capitalism enables human nature to run its course.
That's right. That's right.
Unregulated, the Fed is supposedly supposed to tamp that down, but that turns out they're not so good at it.
Well, and people have always told me this for 10 years. They're like, it's terrible. You're out there writing about Bitcoin. You're causing people to go out and buy it, and they only get disappointed because it crashes. And I'm like, if I'm not supposed to write about Bitcoin under those conditions, I couldn't write about a single investment ever, because that's the way it always is. When the investment is boring and you don't care, that's when you should be buying. When it's on the front page of the Wall Street Journal and you turn on CNN Business and they're talking about, that's probably when you should be selling. I mean, that's just the way things are. I don't care if it's PayPal or Apple or just anything, or real estate in Florida. When
this is capitalism, right? That's that's what it does. And so do you spend any time in cryptocurrency outside of Bitcoin, or you're just within crypto?
I'm really a kind of a choice in currency person. It's interesting because I was a fan of the fork of the Bitcoin Cash fork because I was really frustrated at the inability of Bitcoin to scale. So I'm less certain that I was right about that now, but I still don't think we entirely know. My sense, and a lot of maximalists disagree with me on this, but I think that Bitcoin should have been allowed to scale, and I think we would have been further along with adoption and maybe use than we are today if it had scaled properly. I've been a large blocker for a very long time, just because I didn't like to see those limits on it. And I understand all the arguments to the contrary, right? So, but I don't think I know anymore for sure. Now, there's other people that believe that Bitcoin is not supposed to be a tradable cash unit. It's supposed to be a kind of a foundation for other technologies piled on top of it, and that you can have other cryptos. I think all these positions can coexist. I'm not sure that I was right about the fork. I'm not of the position that every fork is a scam or that everything other than Bitcoin is a shitcoin. That's not my view. I really do. All I've really wanted in money markets has been a choice. To me, that's a dream, because for 100 years we've had this monetary monopoly. Government took over the money and banking systems 100 years ago, and they sucked. I mean, they never improved. I mean, little improvements in payment systems, but apart from that, far from improving, it's gotten worse. Yeah. Like imagine if telephones or cars had been that way. We'd still be driving Model A's and things, Model T's.
Yeah. So I described earlier that to me, I think crypto broadly, this is a term that I use, is infinite. That it's impact, and that whatever you look through the world at, whatever prism you look at the world at, crypto is going to play a huge role there, and is going to change it dramatically, just like the internet changed everything. And so when I looked at it, the prism that I brought to it, and what I saw at the core was community. And that for the first time ever, we could now have institutions that no longer just solve for the man in the middle, but could actually solve for the community. And you could come to the community and you could become and the rules were there. There are the rules. nobody, nobody's going to scratch out a rule and say, all animals are equal, but some are more equal than others, right?
That's
For
right.
the first time, now there was something where that couldn't happen. And that was the exciting thing to me. And to me, forks are a feature, not a bug.
I agree with
They
that.
hey, come to the community. And if the community votes to do something that you don't agree with, you can take everything the community did up to that point and leave. And by the way, you can then start to say, hey, community, look, we're better. Look at us. Look at us. And if you can get the community to come to you, you can be right. The interesting thing is, right, when there is a fork, who gets to keep the name? The community decides, right? So this is just a community thing. It doesn't mean the community makes the right decisions, right? The community does what the community does. And if they make a bunch of bad decisions, then you got to think, wow, am I really in the right community?
That's right. And then the market will judge it harshly. So I don't think we need, passionate Twitter accounts advocating for this or that. I really don't. I mean, it's fine if people want to, but I think a multiplicity of cryptos is really important. I mean, the Ethereum token by itself is, some people blame the Bitcoin protocol for not having deployed, a smart contracting technology within its own protocol early on. It would have prevented the Ethereum. On the other hand, Ethereum exists and it's fine. Stablecoins exist. Bitcoin Cash exists, and I use that all the time for actual cash purchases. Bitcoin Cash is wonderful for that. But I think it's there's a fork of that with BSV, right? And the BSV advocates are like, wow, they'll chew your ear off all day about the glories of their technology.
Yes.
I think it's fine.
Thought on stable coins and CBDCs?
Stablecoins are fascinating to develop, and that they come about as a result of the inability of the banking system to have accommodated crypto early enough. I mean, basically, stablecoins are a kind of a separate banking system for crypto itself. A reflection of the extent of the assets and the market capitalization, and so it's like you're going to tokenize a token market essentially, and I think it's been very valuable. I was at a very early presentation of the leading stablecoin company that at that time had been under a little bit of skepticism because of several audits that hadn't come out entirely cleanly. And I was at Satoshi Roundtable, and the company made its presentation, but this most of
Mexico?
Sir?
The Satoshi's Town Roundtable. That's the one in Mexico?
Yeah, at the time it was. I think it was in Cancun, and this would have been in 2017, I suppose. Yeah, 2017, and the company made a kind of a pitch to the world's most sophisticated technologists in crypto, old gangsters and this sort of thing. And the crowd was initially incredulous, but at the end of 2 hours, everybody had come around to realize that stablecoins were a real deal, and they played a really important market. You could look at it as a kind of a private form of central banking for crypto technology. I think it's good, and I feel the same way about these composite coins that take a weighted balance of many different currencies and kind of repackage them and deploying ledger technology for them. I feel the same way about that. I'm kind of an advocate of the whole sector, and I love the way it's become so awesome. And I tend to avoid all the factionalism within it. That's always inevitable in these kinds of worlds. Nonetheless, it is absolutely true, for whatever reason, that Bitcoin itself, BTC, has been the top performer, in terms of market capitalization over the last year. And I don't know if that's for network reasons of very, very powerful, marketing reasons, or legitimate reasons of security and otherwise. I really don't know. Nonetheless, I'm thrilled to see this market developing. Nor do I think that it's ever going to leave the private sector. I mean, governments are trying to get involved now and make their own cryptos and everything. There's a real problem with that, really. They can't cause the market to love what they do. The market really does speak in this case.
Yeah, and it really is awesome. And Jeffrey, so I want to turn it over for a moment because we're supposed to have my colleague Jason, but oh my God, I didn't have an appreciation for your background. First, and he's going to say just a few words, but before, will you come back? Because I took all your time. I think, we recorded this. We're going to put it out there on YouTube. And I would love to have a follow-up and let the community come and ask you questions. What I've been doing, we'll just, do this for another hour, but it will be a bunch of other people asking you questions.
Oh, I can't possibly stay another hour, only because I have.
No, not now. No, I'm saying, will you come back at a future date?
Oh, I'd love to do that. Yeah. I'd say that's only because I have guests waiting in the house.
Yes, no. This has been awesome. Thank you very much. But I really look forward to letting the community. I'm all about community. I really believe that's I started the largest crypto meetup in 57 cities called Crypto Mondays. As just a community building tool, because I really think that's that's what I'm, the mitzvah I'm doing for the industry. And it's a mitzvah for me too, because the more that this is a thing, the better it is for me. And I just want to turn it over for a minute to my colleague, Jason Dean, who was supposed to talk as well.
Okay.
I can get Jason to talk anytime, you not so much. Jason?
Yeah. So why don't you invite me back at a future date, and I'm going to go meet my guests at the house, if that's okay.
Okay, terrific.
Well, before you go, Jeffrey, I just wanted to say hello as well, and just thank you very much for coming along. Because I have to say, I mean, I obviously I was scheduled to speak, and I, just like everyone else probably, I started listening and thought, actually, do you know what? I don't really want to speak now. I just want to listen to you take us through all this, because I have to say I'm a little bit of a fanboy. I have read quite a lot of your work, and I found it very fascinating and very well put together, actually. And it has inspired me in many ways to do some of the articles that I've written. So, of course, I was very happy to come on today and talk with you. But actually, I've just sat here and listened to you. And you know what? I'm absolutely fine with that.
Yeah,
I really am. So thank you very much.
Yeah, what a great hour, Jeffrey. Thank you so much. And I'll email you. And thanks a lot for coming back. I think we're going to have.
Yeah, I'd love to be here back soon. Yeah, thank you very much. Okay.
Thank you, Jeffrey.
Okay, well, I think we'll wrap up the show now.
Yep, I think we will.
I just want to, oh my God, right? I mean, to talk to somebody who was thinking about all these things in 1995 is really, And it's funny because I've got to know David Chaum a little bit, but he was coming at it, more from the cryptography side of things, and not from the money side of things. And it's amazing, first time thinking about this stuff since 95. Oh my God.
Well, it is, and actually I'm familiar with some of the projects he talked about there, going way back, and the thinking behind them, and you could see where they were coming from, but we just didn't have the technology and the way for it to work at that point. Bitcoin is an idea now really of its time. We couldn't have done this 20 years ago. And it's just the stars and the planets have aligned perfectly for this to happen now. Not that it's going to happen without any problems, of course, but it makes sense that it's occurring now. I mean, money is always our latest technology, right? At the end of the day.
Yeah, well, there's somebody who spends a lot more of his mind share just thinking about Bitcoin. I'm broader, obviously, Bitcoin far more than anything else, but again, I think this is. I'm a huge fan of Ethereum and lots of other cryptocurrencies as well. But when I think of it, I really think that these things were all bubbling around, and at one point you're right. I mean, you needed the technology to be there, but also you needed Satoshi Nakamoto to come along and put them all together. Do you have any thoughts on who Satoshi is?
I don't. I know. I probably, like you, I get asked that question a lot, and I really couldn't answer that. And actually, I don't really spend any time thinking about it. But I will say this, because when you look at the white paper and you go through and look at all the stuff this guy or group of guys, whoever, or girls, put together, you think, how much understanding did they have? Because the more you study Bitcoin, more it reveals itself to be an astonishing piece of genius, really. The technology, the programming, the thought process. I mean, normally when you start a project like this, you never manage to cover all the bases, right? You can only do it in retrospect. Now, somehow, okay, there's a few rough edges which have needed to be tidied up, but fundamentally, it was there from the start. And I think that's amazing.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you on everything that you said. I too don't think don't spend a lot of time thinking about who Satoshi is. You know, I don't think it matters who it is. You know,
not at all.
Could it have become a thing if there wasn't Satoshi Nakamoto? You know, sure, maybe, right? Ethereum's become a thing, and there's a Vitalik. You know, that said, probably the person who has taught me more than anybody about crypto, and actually has a very strong opinion on Satoshi. You know, which I repeated because I think it goes to the point that you made about its brilliance, and that, you know, he really believes that it is so brilliant that the only thing that it could possibly be is aliens.
Okay, I wasn't expecting that answer, but I love it.
Exactly. No, that's yeah. But again, right? I mean, this whole journey for me has been nothing but a mind expansion, right? Of that the world is different than I thought it was, and the possibilities are greater than I thought it was. You know, and I'm not in any way advocating that, but appreciating, again, you know, when I saw Bitcoin, I described that, you know, crypto, I described the experiences. I was looking at the world like this, and then the world was like that, and it was like, oh my God. But actually, after a few months, I realized, right? It
gets bigger the more you look at it.
Exactly. No, I was looking at the world like that, and then the world was like that.
Yeah.
Right. And it keeps on getting bigger. Exactly.
Incredible.
So, anyways, thanks a lot for. I'm sure you enjoyed that as much as me. Oh my God! Thanks for everybody who stuck around till the end, and I really look forward. Obviously, Jason, you'll come back and be a panelist as well. And again, feel free when he comes back. You know, the nice thing is we get to ask him questions at any time we want, you know, as he's blah, blah, blah. And that was, I mean, I thought, yeah, he was really laying down some unbelievable context and knowledge. And I think that, you know, the more you know that, the more you understand about how we got to where we are, the more you understand about, you know, where we can go.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Lou. I know it didn't work out quite the way we planned, but, you know, I really, really don't mind. I found that so fascinating, and he was a really great guest. And he looked like an economist, right? He looked exactly how I hoped he would look, which was fantastic.
Oh, my God. Yes. He was really like out of central casting.
Okay, take care, man. I'll see you next time.